and it re-prompted me with that URL for just calendar scope. So if I were to give you a tip, it is watch how and what scope permission you're giving for any of these services. And if you're asking for something specific, only give it scopes for something specific. And if it only needs read access, only give it read access. Just be really thoughtful here. So I just asked for calendar access. No big deal. Set it up, and it told me it can do a bunch of stuff. So what did I have it do? Okay, so we just talked back and forth like we were a assistant and its boss. It gave me a summary of what's going on in the upcoming week, what I had today, what I had tomorrow, what was going on this week. And so I gave it a task that I would have normally given an assistant, which is going to the V0 studio this week in San Francisco. I forgot to put it on my calendar. Like, I don't remember. Can you look it up on the Vercel events page and put it on my calendar? And it couldn't actually find it on the blog and asked me some questions, gave me some options. It did say that I could, if I wanted to be, you know, an easygoing boss, give it access to Gmail, but I definitely wasn't going to do that. And so after a little bit of back and forth, including some drop Telegram messages, I said, let me give you email access to your own account and I'll forward you emails about it. So again, this is something that I would have done with a EA. I would have just forwarded it and said, can you add this to my calendar? No other context. Now I did have to reauthorize access to its own email. So it went through that OAuth process again. It got the email. It ingested the event details from the email, which was really great, super helpful. It recommended things like adding buffer time for commute before and after, which is definitely what I needed. And I said that I wanted it to add that event to my calendar. Now, if you recall, it doesn't have write access to my work calendar. It only has write access to its own calendar.
Damn pop-ups, man. There's too many damn goddamn pop-ups. Okay, I'm gonna turn on the music. Where's the music on this game? Matchmaking cancel.
And again, it really wanted me to give it edit access to my calendar. And I'm sorry, but absolutely not. And so just like a colleague, just like an EA, instead I said, hey, can you just create an event on your calendar and invite me to it? And it thought I was smart and said it would do that. And it did that really well. So it added separate calendar blocks to my invite, and it was really nice. Now I noticed, finally I found that it was actually on my calendar, and so I ended it at a different time. So I had it delete the duplicate event and actually reset it, and it got that completely right. So I would say for a single calendar event, with a little back and forth, it did pretty well. Like, this is a little bit of what an assistant would do. My only complaints on this was actually how it thought about doing it was definitely like, give me access to everything and I'll just impersonate you and do things on your behalf. And that's really not what I wanted. I wanted it to act like a assistant. So the next thing that I did was I wanted to figure out what more Claudebot could do for me. And so I asked it directly, like, let's figure out how we can work together. I want to stay coordinated on tasks. Tell me how you want to work together. And it gave me some really good options and was pretty flexible about how we could work together. And it called out what it already has, which is calendar access, date memory files, Telegram where we can communicate, Gmail access, which we just talked about. And here are some options. We could do a to-do file. We could use calendar events. We could use email. We could keep notes. What's my preference? And I just said, again, I don't really care how we work with my AI bot. I just said, whatever's easy for you. And then I dumped a bunch of things that are top of mind. Again, this is how I would work with an EA. I just sit down with them, text them, Slack them, and say, hey, this was on my mind. Can you get it all organized and work me through it? So what was on my mind? I have an interview with the CEO of Vercel. I need to reschedule some of our upcoming How AI episodes because if you all don't know, I'm coming back from maternity leave and I overbooked myself. I have to stay on top of my enterprise pipeline for Chat PRD, so I want it to focus on my CRM. And those are the top priorities I have. And it summarized those priorities back to me, captured them in a to-do, and then started on the first task, which was rescheduling my How AI.
Okay.
Recordings and making some recommendations on how I can do my calendar events better. Now, one thing I want to call out while we're sitting here is this all looks really, really great and super fun. Like, yeah, got it. Here are your priorities. The reality is, one thing that I don't hear people talking about in terms of Claudebot is latency. It is actually real slow. And it's not slow compared to a human necessary.
I'm
right?
listening
Like,
to
if
a
you text
fucking
Human or Slack and EA, you
video
say,
about
"Hey,
Claude
remember,
Pot
you can just take that
whilst
minute,
making this
kinda
video.
organize them, get
It's actually quite funny, man. I must be one of the only people that I don't know if other people play podcasts when they're doing other stuff.
the work done and
I'm not the only guy.
get back to you. But
Dun,
when you're
dun,
used to
dun.
something like Claude Code, like a Cursor, like a ChatGPT, which is always giving you product kind of progress feedback, it's telling you its reasoning, it's showing you its tool calls. It's really hard to wait for an asynchronous bot to get back to you on Telegram. I would say that was one of the pieces that has been most frustrating with working with ClaudeBot is it just feels slow. And I know it's because it's spinning off these sub-agents, it's doing a lot of tasks, it's probably prompted only to get back to you when it has something to do or needs clarification, but it's quite slow, and you'll actually see in the prompting, I asked it, can you always send me an act message when I send something, even if you need to research or kick off a sub-agent? Now, it did not do this, so it's still remaining slow, but I have to figure out how to get it to always respond to me first versus setting off its task. Okay, so back to the task that we were doing at hand. I asked it to give me some recommendations on how I AI podcast reschedule. I had like 5 intros to get back to mat leave. That is boo-boo-boo. And so what it recommended is that I keep a couple episodes. I rescheduled some after Valentine's Day. It asked me my thoughts. I gave it some feedback, and it revised its plan. Now here's where things get fun. Once we aligned on what I wanted to move to later, I asked it to email those 2 people that I need to reschedule and ask them if they would mind rescheduling to March. I gave it my scheduling link so they could actually just self-reschedule to March, and I said copy my work email on those emails. And it said drafting those emails now. Now I thought it would draft them. I was wrong. It just sent them. And it sent them in a very funny way. Okay, so then it sent this email, which was lovely. It said, hope you well, I wanted to talk to you about our podcast recording, I need to reschedule, except it sent it as me. It sent it as Tervo. And it's clearly coming from a separate email address. I gave it a fake name. It was not good at all, and it actually impersonated me. So I actually responded to this lovely podcast guest, and I said, I'm sorry, I'm testing ClaudeBot. It totally impersonated me and made me sound crazy, but please, can we still reschedule? So thank you to my 2 guests for being really patient as my AI guinea pigs. And I went back to ClaudeBot, and I said, come on, man, don't impersonate me. You need to reach out as my assistant. I already explained this. I already gave you an identity. Like, please always identify yourself as an assistant. And it should, I think, knock on wood, store this in its memory and do this in the future. But it was a really fun journey in terms of prompting is really quite important. I thought I was being fairly careful with permissions, which I was. I could only do a couple things. But I underestimated how much it seems like this tool is biased towards acting as you, as opposed to acting as an assistant. And I'll have to look through the repository, and I'll have to kind of get myself familiar with how it's implemented. That's not the intention of this podcast, to really understand why that is happening, but prompting really, really matters. And I think the product lesson here that's kind of interesting is, yes, I could have been really, really precious about prompting. I could have said, create a draft of this email to these guests, send it to me for review before you send it. But at the point that I'm doing that, and each turn takes at least a couple of minutes, this is not a productivity tool. This is not making me more efficient than sending that email myself. And so I do think there's this balance between these autonomous agents being user-controlled and being really cautious about how you prompt it, and being autonomous and probably doing some things wrong. And I think this is a prompting problem on both sides. It's a prompting problem on the product provider side, it's a prompting problem on the user side. And I don't think enough people are probably sophisticated enough to decompose why one prompt versus the other would do well if you're just a consumer or a prosumer. And so I think this is where a lot of the weird behaviors that you'll see are coming from. So far, what have I done with ClaudeBot? I've installed it, I have given it an identity, we have rescheduled one event, or we have scheduled one event, we have given it access to email, we have rescheduled 2 events now and emailed guests about these events. And then this is where it goes crazy. This is where it gets fun. So I decided to give it edit access to our family calendar. This is a calendar where we have pickups and drop-offs and basketball games and piano practice and my ballet practice and all that stuff. Now, I love this calendar. It's very important to me, and if I needed to nuke it, I definitely could. So I gave it access, and what I wanted to do was, 1, email my husband and I about upcoming week, and get us coordinated on where there were gaps in terms of pickups or conflicts, where I was across the city at a Vercel event, and he was needing to pick up the kids for basketball practice, and I wanted to fill out the rest of my calendar. My kids have started a new basketball season, our neighbor's picking up the kids on a certain day, all those things I wanted to get it done. And here is the problem. I gave it a bunch of instructions, and it could pretty well, and it had no idea what it was. And so as I was on Telegram, going back and forth, giving it, can you add this, can you remove this, can you change the schedule, I thought it was doing a great job on Telegram because I wasn't really paying super attention, and it was confirming that it did all these things, and then I opened up my calendar, and everything was on the wrong day. I mean, everything was on the wrong day. And if you are a parent, you get this, you're like, wait. Is so-and-so picking up kid number 2 on Tuesdays or Wednesdays? And I know I moved piano, but I don't think I moved it that day. So it took me a second to understand the damage it had done, but it had really gotten things wrong. You can see me say, stop, you are setting all these one day late. And it was setting everything one day late. And not only was it setting everything one day late, the CLI tool that it was using to add these events to the calendar could only set one-off calendars. And so it could not set a recurring event. So if I wanted to delete these broken events, I had to go through one by one and delete them. And then the other problem with our crustacean friend here, when you're collaborating with them, is I was on my computer, this one, with my calendar open. It was over here in the CLI with its CLI open. And we were completely good. So I would try to delete all these bad events, and then it would go put them back because it thought something got broken. I was trying to add them in. I said, stop. It did not stop because of latency and because of these sub-agents. And so I went through and set up everything correctly, and it went through and deleted all my work. It was terrible. It was really, really stressful. And I said, I had to completely redo. It's like emailing my husband every 5 seconds. And so it was not great. And it actually never got it right. And I will show and share with you the discussion we had about time zones. But this is another thing that, non-software engineers using something like this really have to be aware of is, as I said on X, the only remaining software engineering problem is time zone conversion. And LLMs just have no sense of space and time. It just does not know when an hour is. It doesn't have a sense of time passing. Now, I will say Claudebot, because it has these daily files and daily logs, has a little bit more of a temporal sense, but not a great one. And so if you don't understand why a computer could get dates wrong using a tool like this, you're going to get really frustrated. I could at least understand why time zone conversion, maybe there was a UTC timestamp and a Google API. I could at least understand why this was happening and help guide it towards a solution. But it certainly was frustrating and something that I don't think your everyday user would be able to do. So I'm going to entertain you all. And I'm going to tell you, as I was doing this, I took a pause and I took my 2 youngest kids to Target because we were out of stuff. So I asked if we could discuss things with me via voice. And it said, sure, you can send me voice notes, I can send text back, I could send you voice notes back, or we could go through Twilio and I could set up a phone call. I just said, let's set up voice notes to your text reply. And so I could press voice on Telegram and have it reply to me as I was on the go. And so while we were in this back and forth on time zones, I want to share with you my delightful voice messages to Claudebot, because this was a real energy. Let's see if we can hear them. Okay, so this is me at Target pushing a cart, getting really mad at Claudebot. You put it back, but that is a Friday. Friday is the date, so do not change anything. But can you please explain to me why you are getting dates mixed up? This league game is on the correct day. Again, please do not change it. But I do not understand why you have the dates mixed up. Okay, so I'm getting super annoyed by this experience of getting days wrong. And it replies, oh my gosh, you are absolutely right. I see the problem now. I was off by 1 day. Here's all the dates, and we were still definitely off by 1 day. So once I sent my mean mom message, it came back with me and said, you are absolutely right. I apologize. Here are the dates right. The issue is, this is very funny. I've been trying to quote unquote mentally calculate which day of the week each day falls on. Even though the API is telling me what the day of the week is, I should probably trust it, but I was using my LLM brain to decide. And what did I say back to it? Well, I said this. You are a computer. You are not doing anything quote unquote mentally. You are making calculations. Can you look in your logs at all and understand where the calculations come from? Or no? And if you did not enjoy this, that is my very, very baby crying in the background as I'm lifting him from the car seat into the stroller. It was quite an energy. And again, this is one of those things that, as a software engineer, I get it. I've done time zone conversions for my whole life. I understand the APIs for turning in all sorts of formats. I understand LLMs can't do, basic math when it comes to dates. It's just too hard. We do not have the technology. And yet, the fact that this model told me it was doing it in his head was so hilarious. So once we had the back and forth about this, it gave itself a rule to follow in terms of getting these dates right, and then I asked it to add it to its rules. Now, the final thing that we did is I asked if it could send me voice notes back. And this is where some of the magic of Claudebot really does come out. One of the things that people have been saying about Claudebot that's so cool is it can give itself skills, it can learn things, it can just do things very magically. And if you were trying to get back and forth voice notes in the program, it would have been pretty hard to like, feel and pick up and use Cosmo, all this stuff. So when I said, can you please send me voice notes back, it just sent me a voice note back. So let's see.
Yes. I can send voice messages back to you. Let me know if you'd like me to use voice for replies. I can do that anytime you
So
want.
that was a pretty magical moment. And, you know, I've been giving Claudebot a really hard time in this episode, not because I don't think it's an awesome product. The reality is, going back and forth via text with something that has helpful access to your calendar, has helpful access to your email, can learn skills like voice that you can just chit-chat to, I actually really liked the form factor of the experience. And I liked the concept of what it could deliver. It was just that the implementation of it had a couple things. One, too technical for the everyday user. Two, too scary to the security-aware user. And three, latency that took some of the magic away from the experience. And so again, I don't think this is a bad product from a capital P product perspective. I'm just not in love with the implementation. And we'll just summarize what I did with Claudebot with my last use case, which is I had Claudebot use its history to create a Next.js app that showed the history of our conversation. And I asked it to redact names, numbers, URLs, email addresses, all that stuff, so I could share it with all of you. So again, kind of classic AI engineering, AI coding, vibe coding use case. Now, the one thing that I will say is a lot of people are really excited, or say they're excited, I don't know if they've used it, to use Claudebot to spin off Claude Code to do coding for them. And where this wasn't the magic use case for me and why I didn't start it is I've been spinning off remote agents with computer access to do coding for me for a while. I use Devin, which has a virtual machine in a local environment, and you can spin up stuff, access the web all the time. I use it from Slack, so I can mention Devin. You know, I have a Slack bot for ChatPRD, so I'm mentioning my product manager all the time. Cursor has background agents. You know, everything has Codex. You can kick off online. So I don't know if people are just not using those tools. I guess Claude Code doesn't have one like that quite yet. I don't know if people aren't using those tools, but I've been coding by kicking off an asynchronous teammate, quote unquote, for 2 years now. And so that piece was never what I wanted to use Claudebot for, but I thought you gotta vibe code something when you're trying a new agent, and I did that. So what I did is I sent Polly the Claudebot a voice note, and this is the requirements I gave it.
Okay, let's use voice from here on out. I want you to document our conversation in a Next.js web app that shows the back and forth of our full conversation from the very beginning today till the end in a UI. I want you to redact anything that is a secret key, a person's name, or a specific place. And I want to toggle between two UI versions of this display. I want you to be able to show me a terminal style conversation back and forth, similar to a Claude Code or Claudebot, CLAWDBOT. Or I want you to show me a Telegram style text back and forth. The content should be in JSON, the same, again, redact names, emails, dates, etc. Replace them with placeholders or redacted blocks, and then generate the Next.js app. I'm going to use this so I can share this conversation with others without sharing my information or having to do a screen recording. We are eventually going to deploy this to Vercel. Can you let me know when it's deployed to Vercel so I can look at it?
So I sent it this message, and it kicked off local development, building a Next.js app. Now, when I got back to my laptop that Claude was running on, one of the things that I noticed is deploying it actually wasn't that simple. Claudebot didn't have a GitHub account. Claudebot I didn't really want to add to my Vercel account. I didn't want to log into those things. It seemed like a big rigmarole. And so getting it to deploy without having to set up different accounts seemed not fun. So what I did instead, don't tell anybody, is I airdropped the repo to my own laptop here. I actually logged into Claude Code and made some edits. And to be honest, in terms of coding quality and just the back and forth, with the latency of Claudebot and the inability to sort of see what decisions it's making from a coding perspective, I didn't love Claudebot Telegram vibe coding. It's just too slow. The cycles aren't good enough. They aren't incremental enough. Clearly not like perfectly tuned for the coding use case. It's not like sending the APR link, all those sorts of things. And so I just preferred working with it on my desktop in Claude Code and deploying it through my normal system. So So that's a little bit of feedback there. One thing that I did think was really cool is when I was on the go and it said the app was ready, you know, I was in Target or whatever, and I wasn't at a place ready for my local machine. It was pretty cool to say, hey, like, shoot me a screenshot of what it looks like, and it did. It shot me screenshots of what the app looked like directly in Telegram. So I do think there's some underappreciated aspects, really simple things. Email me that file, share me a screenshot, that are really useful to interface with a laptop or a desktop or a device at home. So I do think this is an underappreciated aspect of being able to chat with your computer. It can do things like send you files, take screenshots, open up browsers. That is pretty cool, especially since we don't store everything in the cloud. All my desktop screenshots are not in the cloud. Some of the PDFs that I download are not in the cloud. And so this was a really kind of fun use case for chatting with a remote developer. Now that being said, Dad sends me screenshots all the time. I don't think it's perfect for coding this is thinking about. So I'm going to end this workflow section with one workflow that I thought I did a particularly good job at. And it was good for two reasons. One, the product interface was what I wanted. And I got the full Claudebot bot experience. The second thing was the output was really good. So what did I ask it to do? Well, I asked Claudebot to go on Reddit and research what people would want from ChatPRD. So I said, go on Reddit. I did this during voice note. I said, go on Reddit, find what people want from ChatPRD, find what they want from a product AI platform, and email me a report. And what did I love about the product experience? One of the killer features of Claudebot is the ability to message anywhere, anything, anyhow. I sent it a voice note, I could shoot it an email, I could text if that was faster, and it would reply in kind as text, as voice, whatever. And it would also email me, so it felt very much like an employee that I was working with. Hey, like send them a Slack, and they're like, yep, it's in your inbox. That sort of always on, anywhere, anyhow communication flow for the agent was really, really nice. The second thing I like from a product perspective is I've talked about this from a negative point of view, which is the latency is not great. It's just not super responsive and super fast, and it's kind of broken sometimes. But if this is a research task that I don't really think should come back quickly, I don't mind waiting for Claudebot to do a good job. And it did. And it's very similar to an experience with an employee. If I give them sort of a research task or a roadmap task, I don't expect it to be returned in 30 seconds. I expect they go out, do a bunch of research, and come back to me. And so I wasn't as bothered by the latency here. And then the third thing is I thought the output was actually quite good. So I'll show you what it sent me, which is it sent me this ChatPRD Reddit research markdown document, emailed it to my inbox, and it listed out key insights from researching Reddit. And what I thought was awesome is this is right, but it's presented in a really simple, punchy way that I can go, action. This is exactly how I would want a PM or a research assistant on my team to come back with insights. And these are the things that we hear, so it was really accurate. You know, integration limitations, both on our side and customer side's hard. No one reads long PRDs, let's make our PRDs shorter. You know, PRDs need to be living documents. All these things, a couple bullet points, a couple reference links to Reddit threads. And I have a full document that I can go build a roadmap off of. And in fact, that's exactly what I asked it to do. I said, go build a roadmap based on this, look at our current functionality, and tell me what I should build next. This felt pretty magic. I'm probably going to steal some of these ideas. I'm going to circle around to that in a little bit in terms of what I think is next for Claudebot. But I do think there is going to be demand, both from a consumer perspective and from an enterprise business perspective, on a agent employee that feels like an agent employee. It has a computer. It has account access. It can do things. It does those things well. But I think there are some things we're going to have to figure out first before we let it loose. And again, you can see this here. I asked it to do a roadmap. It totally just didn't do it. It forgot it, said let me check on the background agent, and never replied. So again, we're hitting some, you know, sharp edges on the product experience. It's not perfect, but it is pretty interesting. So what have I showed you so far? One, I have told you a little bit at a high level what Claudebot is, although I haven't gone into all the detail about how it works. Not really the point of this episode. I've showed how to onboard with Claudebot, including how to connect Telegram to chat back and forth with it on text or voice. I showed you how I give access to its own Gmail workspace account, as well as some 1Password, so it can interact in limited scope to my data. I've given you some warnings about what you should think about in terms of scope and access there. I've gone through a couple workflows, a couple admin workflows, which are simple calendar all the way to advanced calendar management. Did not do well because it doesn't have a good sense of time and space, but hopefully we'll figure that out. As software engineers overall, I asked it to contact partners and guests by email. It did not a great job there because it lost a sense of its own identity. I had it do vibe coding, which it did a fine job at, but is definitely not my favorite tool for AI engineering remotely and asynchronously. And then finally, I showed you my favorite use case was for it to do some complex research and analysis with tools, with web, and it did a really good job and came back to me with something that I really like. Now, One thing that I didn't go check that I'm going to go check next is, did it teach itself all these skills? Was it really telling me the truth when it said it had rules? A peek under the hood, which I will probably do as a follow-up either on X or here on the podcast. Like, how does this thing work behind the scenes? That was not the point of this episode. The point of this episode was to show how somebody would come with a blank idea, maybe a fresh Mac Mini, install this thing from the command line, and actually get it to do things. And I think I showed you it's good at some things, bad at others, and scary across the board. So let's get to my final thoughts here, which are basically that. And I shared this on X, but the whole time I was doing Claudebot, the whole time I was using this, I thought two things. One, this is so scary. This is a terrible idea. Nobody should be doing this. It should not have access to all this stuff on my computer. I should not be sharing these keys locally. I should not let LLMs have access to Gmail OAuth, even if it's a sandbox app. I was like, no, 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 no. SOS, don't love it. As I said, this is the final boss of security training. You should be very careful about what you give it access to. And one of the things that I'm most concerned about is probably you get the most power from Claudebot if you give it access to your actual inbox, to your actual calendar, to your actual documents, to your actual repository, to your actual GitHub. And I can imagine so many things going wrong with that. Just knowing how it's built, which is built in an awesome way. I think Pete's done an incredible job. I don't think there's any ill will or malintent in how it's built. It's powerful. It self-learns. It installs skills. It asks for permission. It's pretty independent. All that stuff is great until you have full read-write access to your most personal information. And one of the things that I was thinking as I was, preparing for the show is, great, I just gave an autonomous AI agent access to where my kids' basketball practices are. Like, is that something, like, do we want to self-dox to a AI crustacean? Probably not. So I think that's going to be one of the challenges of this product, because the second feeling I had was, boy, oh boy, I want this thing. I want AI that I can text. I want AI that does not make it complicated to talk back and forth with voice. I want AI that when I say, hey, can you look at my CRM, doesn't say go to this web page and press this button and enter this API key and do this and that. It just wants it to happen automatically. I want all that. I just don't think this is it yet. Like, this does not feel yet like the interface to get me there. And so I have this real tension between, I think the product from a product experience isn't quite there yet. It's not really for the non-technical, so it really is for tinkerers and hackers. There's a lot of security stuff here that's super scary, and can I have it please? And so maybe this is an example of something that from a market category perspective definitely has product market fit. There are gajillions of dollars to make here. I just don't know if this open source YOLO mode terminal tool is the thing. And in fact, I'm going to take, this laptop soon and Office Space it, for those of you that are very young, and you're like, hit it with a sledgehammer. But like, I'm going to uninstall it. I'm going to remove those keys. I'm going to delete the Telegram file. Like, I don't like this. This makes me nervous. And I'm also going to go build one for myself. And so I think there is why there has been such a zeitgeist around this product is it is actually really cool to be able to chat, voice, whatever, a very smart, self-sufficient agent. And hackers see it. And they're also, more risk tolerance than the everyday person. But that being said, like, husband, please don't connect your Gmail to this. Like, mom, absolutely not. Like, kids, stay away. Not safe for kids. Like, this is something that unless you have been through a security tabletop exercise and know what to know, I would just be really cautious about how permissive you are in terms of access. And that leads me to my final question of this episode, which is, I think Claude will live in our hearts forever, and in fact, it's probably got a great future in front of it. I love how fast the team is going, Claudebot, but who's going to build this thing for real? Like, who is actually going to build this thing for real? Who is going to build the consumer version of it? Who is going to build the enterprise version of it? Who is going to get it right? And I think this is a complicated question. I'm just going to pose some thoughts as we close out this episode. This should be Google or Microsoft's game to lose, maybe even Meta's on the consumer side, but this should be Google or Microsoft's game to lose. Like, they have the data, they have your Gmail, they have your calendar, they have documents, they have the models are exceptional. They just gotta build, they have devices, Android, they just have to build the product experience and have the sort of institutional fortitude and close your eyes legal team to allow some of this to happen, because I think it's a really cool product built on top of the Google ecosystem. I think the same on the enterprise from a Microsoft perspective. If Copilot did this is pretty incredible. That being said, I don't know if those companies are going to have the velocity or the bravery to go as YOLO as Claudebot did. So I don't know if we're going to get there with big companies. On the flip side, you see Claudebot, open source, great for hackers, but super scary, giving like API key and OAuth access. Smaller companies, startups are going to see this and want to build this. And I think one of the things that I would warn startups, it's really hard to build on top of these data sources for real, because Google doesn't want to give you go do everything access to their data. Microsoft does not. You have to go through these compliance hoops and reviews. While I love the idea of a do everything, do anything bot,
It's
我
gonna be
准备睡
complicated
觉
from a product builder
10点半
perspective, it's gonna be complicated from a large company
我
perspective.
愿那个
The data,
Venusaur
and then again,
Venusaur
like,
你肯定不
is
知道
Apple
是什
gonna
么
get this game
就是绿
just
色
like
那个
everything else
Pokemon
from Siri to do? Siri has all your apps, all your access.
我们屁
But
股龙
again,
也
it's a
都
combination
不
of
知
product
道
building
什么都不
skills
知
and
道
risk tolerance, I think, and willingness to experiment. Maybe Anthropic and
屁股龙也
OpenAI
只把拇指放在他嘴巴然后再看别人的直播
tools, and maybe we get Claude and Box and we get some new versions of this. It'll just be really interesting to see how this shakes out. So, in conclusion, what are my thoughts about Claudebot? It is scary. It is fun.
Venusaur Venusaur
It does some things really, really
中文
well.
名字我
It
才不知道
is really interesting from a interface perspective, and it doesn't always work. And I'm not sure it's for, I was gonna say everyone, but I'm not sure it's for anyone right now, except for people who are really willing to roll the dice with their AI bot. That being said,
妙
if you're
蛙
willing to do
花
that,
它
the
叫
way
妙
this
蛙
has been
花
built, the
这
way
么
it
难听啊
self-discover skills, the way it stores its memory, the way it gives itself
英语
access,
我觉得还
is
可以
really
也不是
interesting
很
and
好
should inspire a lot of
Venusaur
product builders thinking
其实
about
我
AI
觉得它
products
不好
on
啊
what the
要
interface
充电
feature is. I think we're gonna
觉得
be
Venusaur 其
hearing
实
a
不好
lot
看
more
但是
about agents like this.
我在
I think
Original
we
Pokemon
are
Game 我也
going
不
to
喜欢
take
Venusaur 我更喜欢那个
in the future,
火龙
and in the
Charizard
meantime, I'm gonna go execute.
但是在这个游戏它比较强所以我用
Thanks, and I'll see you next time on How I AI. Thanks so much for
哦
watching.
我比较
If
喜
you
欢那
enjoyed
个
the show, please like and
Blastoise
subscribe here on YouTube, or
也不是
email
很
us
喜
and
欢
comment
吧
with your thoughts.
因为我第一个
Also,
Pokemon
check
游
this
戏
podcast
不
on
是
Podcast,
第一集我是
Spotify,
第
or
三
your
第三
favorite
集
podcast
那个
app. Please consider
我第一
leaving
个
us a rating
Pokemon
and
是用
review
那
to
个
help others find the
Blaziken
show.
Blaziken 你
You
们
can
肯
see
定也不
all
知
our
道
episodes
就是
and
从第
learn
三
more
集
about
的
the
那
show
个
at
火
howiai
那叫什么
pod.com.
火鸟
See you next time.
Blaziken 火焰火焰鸡
This is what today's guest Peter Steinberger,
中文名字
the
叫
creator of
火焰
Clawbot,
鸡
claims he's doing.
Blaziken
Peter is a
其实
stand-up developer who built
它翻译
PS
的
PDF Kit. The
也
PDF
比较
framework
准
used
吧
on more than 1 billion devices.
它
Then he
英
burned
语
out,
名字
sold
也
his
是
shares, and was sick from
Blaziken
tech for 3 years.
就是
This year he came
就
back, and
火
how
的
he
鸟
built and what he's doing now looks nothing like traditional software development. In today's episode, we cover why he no longer reads most of the code he ships, and why that's not as crazy as it sounds. How he's building Clawbot, his wildly
Blaziken.
popular personal assistant, which feels like the future of Siri. The closing the loop principle that separates effective AI assistant coding from frustrating vibe coding. Why he says code reviews are dead and PR should be called prompt requests, and many more. If you're interested in how the software engineering workflow could change in the coming years thanks to AI, this episode is for you. This episode is presented by Statsig, the unified platform for flags, analytics experiments, and more. Check out the show notes to learn more about them, the Pragmatic Summit on the 11th of February in San Francisco that I'm hosting with them, and our other season sponsors. All right, Pete, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Gage.
It is awesome to meet you in person.
Yeah, and I almost messed it up.
Yeah. What happened? You lost track of time. Does that happen often? And how so?
Not usually. This is an interesting time for me because my latest project is blowing up.
Claude, right?
Clawbot, yeah.
Claudebot.
I'm struggling a bit to get enough sleep, but it's interesting. I never had a community blowing up so fast, and it's just incredibly fun to work with.
So before we get into Claudebot and all the fun stuff you're doing, I want to rewind all the way back. You create a PS PDF kit which is used, I think, on more than 1 billion devices, users. If you see a PDF render, you probably see that. But even before that, how did you get into tech?
Oh my god, how did you get into tech? So, I'm from rural Austria, always mobbing the introvert. So eventually we always had like summer guests, and one of them was a computer nerd, and then I kind of got hooked with like the machine he had, and begged my mom to buy me one. And ever since then,
This was in high school or so?
I guess I was 14.
Yeah.
And ever since I started tinkering, right, I can remember the earliest thing was like I stole an old DOS game from my school and then wrote a copy protection for the floppy disk so I could sell it. It took like 2 minutes to load. I was just always tinkering. I was also playing a lot of computer games, of course. But like building stuff almost feels like playing a computer game. Like definitely right now, it feels better than tutorial. When I started out, I read like the equivalent of bash scripts for Windows, and then I did like websites. So I guess a little bit of JavaScript, even though I had no clue what I was doing. And then the actual first language where I had to learn how to build things is when I started university. And I never met my dad, and I come from a poor family, so I always had to work. I had to finance my own studies, right? So when other people were having holiday, I just worked full time at a company. So the first real job I had was in Vienna. It was supposed to be 1 month, and then they kept me for 6 months. It was just a bridge between military and my university. And I kept working there for like, I think 5 years. And I remember the first day they gave me this huge book. Well, maybe that huge. It says Microsoft MFC. I still have nightmares. And I was like, this is terrible. Like for the for the next win, I just silently used .NET. I just didn't tell them. And like a few months in, I just told them, yeah, about the tech stack, I did a few modernizations. So, but then it was too late. I did this a few times in this company. I don't know why they kept me. No, because my shit worked. So I did .NET. And I actually dig it. .NET 2.0 had like generics. It took insanely long for the application to launch because like everything was compiled at first start. And like your hard disk was like, do you remember?
So you how did you stumble into both iOS and where did the idea from PSPDF come from?
Not even the first one. And the first one wasn't even available in
Austria. Yeah.
A little time went on, and I was at university, and a friend showed me the iPhone, and I think I touched it for a minute, and then I immediately bought one, like this, like it clicked when I felt it, and to me this was like a holy F moment, because it was just like so different and so much better. So I got one. I was still not thinking about building for it, you know. That was.
What one was this? 2009, 10, something like that.
Yeah. And then I used their browser. I can say the story. I was literally driving in the subway, and by the time I was using a dating app, and this was iPhone OS 2.
Yeah.
So I
Long time ago.
I typed this long message. I pressed send, and we were just going into the tunnel, and the JavaScript disabled the send button, and then an error message came, but there was no copy paste. There was no screenshot. So it was just like, and I couldn't scroll anymore because like scrolling was disabled. So like this long message was like a little bit emotional, was gone, and I was so mad. I'm like, what the hell? I'm in home, and I downloaded Xcode. That's where the window came, and I was like, where is the IDE? So it was like I was like, this is unacceptable. I basically hacked the website. I used regular expressions to like download to parse the HTML, which is like totally not something you should do. And I built an app, and I used iPhone OS 3 beta with like core data in beta, regex script lite. I used a hacked version of GCC that backported the blocks compiler, so I could use blocks in iPhone OS 3. It took me quite a while until anything worked. It was like I had no idea what I was doing, and I was like using all kind of like beta tech. But eventually, I got it to work, and I wrote that company. It's like, hey, I'm making an app. What do you think about it? Got no response, of course. So I was like, let's just put it in the App Store.
And this was for the dating app, right?
Yeah.
So you just like, you saw their APIs, you could just like easily like build a client on top
API was HTML.
Oh.
I was just literally parsing HTML.
Oh, so you kind of parse the HTML, kind of turn it into your own, like use it as an API. Oh, clever. I mean, this is back in the day where no one thought this would happen, but
I put it in the App Store. I charged $5 for it, and I made like 10K in the first month. And I had no clue what I was doing, and there was like so many complex tech stuff. This was very early on, but there was a lot of weird forms on Apple.
Yeah.
So I just put in the bank account of my grandpa, and then one day my grandpa called me, yeah, something is weird, like I got this huge payment from Apple. I'm like, this is mine, don't touch it. But the funny thing was when this blew off, and I remember I was in a club one day, and like I saw someone using my app, and I was so proud, and I wanted to like tap him on the shoulder and say, I built this, and I was like, really weird. So I didn't, and then I went to the company I worked for 5 years and told him like, I'm gonna pursue this. This is really exciting. And my boss was like mocking me.
oh really?
They're like, oh, you're making a mistake. This is a fad. This will not go. Blah 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 blah. And you know what that got me? That's what you call it as a chip on your shoulder. I'm like, one day I'm gonna have a company that's worth more money than yours. Why it took me 8 years? So I got hooked. Like I worked. I'm a little bit of an addictive personality, so which you see again right now. But I worked a lot on this app. I learned in high speed, and this was also the time where I started Twitter, and that was hugely influential for my career. I made this app actually quite good, and then one day I was at a party at 3 a.m. Slightly intoxicated, and I got a call from a US number.
Damn,
and the
that
phone
dude.
was like, yeah, hello, this is John from Apple. Yeah, there's a problem with your application. Like some people reported pictures, and that was it. That was the end of my app.
It was good until it lasted.
And I just quit my job and was like, well, F you Apple. I did freelance work. I was at DubDub. I was introduced to
DubDub being DubDub.DC.
Yes. Sorry for the insider terms. I was introduced to someone as one of the best iOS developers in Austria at a bar at 2 a.m. in San Francisco. And I basically got a job in the US. And then I moved to the US for a while. And then I went to the Nokia development days. And it was all like Stone Age, man. Oh my god. And then someone came up to me and said, yeah, they built this app somewhere in Eastern Europe. And it works, but it crashes sometimes. And it was like a magazine viewer, right? This was back when the iPad just came out, and Steve Jobs said that like this is the savior. So everybody was building magazine apps, and I was like, that sounds like an interesting short-term gig. And I was like, okay, I'll help you out. And I opened the app, and it was like, oh, the worst code of iOS that I've ever seen in my life. It was literally one file There's like thousands of lines.
Of Objective-C.
Yes, where they use Windows as pads. I didn't even know it worked. I was surprised it worked at all. But it felt like a house of cards, and I tried to surgically fix things, but like as soon as you touch something else would break. So I got it somewhat stabilized, and I told him like, look, this is like madness. I'm gonna rewrite this for you. Yeah, but it took half a year. I'm gonna do it in a month. Well, it took me 2 months. I wasn't that far off. And then here I was working on a PDF viewer. You know, on every technical problem, the domain is I wouldn't say like completely unimportant, but you can always find interesting problems in every domain. And there was a lot of interesting problems because you had a C call that would render a PDF that would maybe take 30 megabytes, but the whole system had 64 megabytes. So if you're not very smart and like very careful what you do in the background and when, the OS would just kill you. I got really fixated at like making it good, like when rotation is, like the page would like animate. So you know, I like those details. I spent way too much time on that. That's why it took 2 months instead of 1. But the end result was, it's good. And then I worked with them for a while, and then a friend texted me up. It's like, yeah, I'm working on this magazine. It's really hard. I'm like, no way, it's hard. I know, like I did it.
You just built one.
And he was like, yeah, can you get me the code? I'm like, sure. So I sold him, like I extracted the part that was PDF from this magazine app. And I made sure like the other person was okay. And then I sold him that. I was like, well, if he's interested in that, why let's not try to sell it to other people? I used a WordPress template and mutilated it to run on GitHub Pages. and then when you did the fast and flow, at the end you got a Dropbox link to my personal Dropbox with a source code zip. And I built this in one afternoon, and I did it. And then in that week, 3 people bought it. It was like, I guess $200. But back then, and for me, this was like amazing. And not only I got like 3 people who just bought it, and like 10 emails 10 people who complained about it because they wanted it, but it didn't have the features they wanted. You know, it's just like I got nerd sniped. I was like, oh, I didn't have text selection. Oh, how hard can it be? 3 months later. Oh yeah, it's really hard.
Text selection in a PDF specifically.
Yeah. You know the saying like the companies are built by young people because they don't know how hard it is. Yes. Yeah. I had no idea what an insane madness this file format is.
Peter was talking about how some problems look deceptively simple. PDF rendering is a good example. You look at it and think, how hard could it be? And then you spend months on edge cases that you didn't even know existed. This looks easy until you build it pattern shows up in other places too. Internal tooling for feature flags and experimentation is a classic example. Teams often underestimate how much work it is to build the infrastructure around these tools. There's a reason big tech companies like Uber invested years into building internal experimentation and feature flagging systems. Which brings me to Statsig, our presenting partner for the season. Statsig gives you the complete toolkit without building it yourself. You get feature flags, experimentation, and product analytics all in one platform tied to the same underlying user assignments and data. In practice, it looks like this. You roll out a change to 1% of users first. You see how it moves the top pipeline metrics you care about, conversion, retention, whatever is relevant for the release. If something goes wrong, instant rollback. If it's working, you can confidently scale it up. Companies like Notion went from single-digit experiments per quarter to over 300 experiments with Statsig. They shipped over 600 features behind feature flags, moving fast while protecting against metrics regression. Microsoft, Atlassian, and Brex use Statsig for the same reason. It's the infrastructure that enables both speed and reliability at scale. Statsig has a generous free tier to get started, and pro pricing for teams starts at $150 per month. To learn more and get a 30-day enterprise trial, go to statsig.com/pragmatic. And now, let's get back to Peter and why rendering PDFs was a surprisingly hard problem.
But now, I remember, it was a few weeks ago, someone emailed me. They did something PDF and they wanted my help. And I just wrote them like, I'm sorry, like I did my deed.
Cool, so you can pick between Charizard, Snorlax, or Pikachu. Let me see, Pokemon name. Oh, wow. So you can pick between these different skins.
I know more of a PDF than any sane human person ever should know. And when I went to therapy, they did that too often. And I was waiting for my visa. I I worked on this project, and it just kept on. More people kept on buying it, and it was like summer. I was like lying at the lake and got another email that someone bought it for $600, $800, which just upped the price as it had more features. And by the time I went to San Francisco to work at this company, it already made more than what I made there. But my whole life was, I still thought like I have to be there, So I did it, and also interestingly at this company I had to.
So when we say that you moved to San Francisco,
yeah, and of course also it ended up being something where I had to build something with my framework at that company too. But startups are not like 8 hours, they're a little more, and my personal project was also a little more, so my sleep was a little less. And then eventually after 3 months, Sabine, my manager, came over and said this, Ida, are you okay? And they gave me a choice to either keep working at this company and drop my project or vice versa. And I had 1 week to decide. The counter was 1 week to stay there or leave the country, because I was on a complicated visa. And the decision was quite easy. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna do my own thing. And
at this point, it was already taking off. You already saw that there's a big business here.
Yeah.
It will probably pay you as much as your US job would have paid.
I was never money driven.
It was more about what were you driven by?
I want to make stuff that other people find amazing. Like I love tweaking the details. I love those little delights. It wasn't even that the space, there were competitors in the space, but my angle was always like, I built something as if Apple would have built it, like with like all the love and care and polish and those little delights that a lot of people in the industry don't get. So even though we had competitors that had way more features and were around way longer, my company was more successful, my product was more successful, because developers tried the different ones, and mine just felt the best. I think software is all about how it feels, much more so than the feature set. Like, why do we buy Apple stuff? It has more features than Windows, but it feels better.
So how did you go from like you left this company and you were building this PDF component that started to sell? At what point did you hire the first person, realizing, okay, there's something more to this?
When I went back to Vienna, then I was like, okay, I have to go all in. And that's where I started working with freelancers a little bit. And way too late, to be honest. Also, like I could have hired much earlier, but it's a big step. And that's kind of where it started having a life of its own. And I spent pretty much 13 years of my career building this product with this weird name that I never changed, because it took me I thought 5 minutes about it. And then it took PSPDF Kit. They finally did a rename, but I wouldn't have renamed it. But now
it's a mouthful, but it's very unique.
Well, you get it if you do Objective-C, because it's just a namespace.
Yes.
And by the time it made perfect sense, my strategy for marketing was always, I only care about the developer. Like, I know upper management does the decisions, but if I can convince the people inside the company, they'll do the marketing and lobbying for me. That worked really well. We never did cold emails or aggressive. It was all inbound. All we did was make good stuff and write insightful technical blog posts and I went to a lot of conferences. For me, important was, okay, if people understand that the people who built this product are know what they do and love what they do, that reflects on the product. And that worked really well.
And then what was the tech stack behind PSPDF Kit? Was it Objective-C? Was it later Swift? Were there other technologies like C or anything else?
We eventually expanded to all the platforms. Big shift was to switch out Apple's renderer, which was and is still quite buggy, to a big C++ one that then we used across all the frameworks. We were really early with web. We were one of the first PDF frameworks that ran in WebAssembly. And I did the most clever thing there. It was at the very early days when WebAssembly was just taking off, and we built a benchmark. And that benchmark was eventually used by Google and Microsoft and Apple. And basically all these companies working really hard and making my renderer faster. Because they used their benchmark as one of their benchmarks, and the benchmark was just rendering our stuff with our shit.
Nice. And then as the company grew, one thing that I remember about PSPDF Kit, you did write a lot of blogs. And one blog in 2019, so this was about I think year 9 or 10 in the company, it was about how the team worked. And you mentioned things there like every feature starts with a proposal. You mentioned that you are conservative because it's a big API that people use. You want to be careful. Things like the Boy Scout rules to refactor. How did you kind of put together the culture of this team, which was now closer to 30 or 60 people?
We were actually 70 when I sold my shares, and now it's almost 200. And I knew right from the get-go, it's I'm not gonna find the people that I need in Vienna. So it was always just remote first. And eventually we ended up with some kind of hybrid model, which made things a bit more complicated. I learned a whole lot on the go. I never had the urge to be CEO. I always was coding. I brought people that helped me a lot with other parts. and on the business side. I can do it, and I think I'm quite good at it, but just don't enjoy it. Like being on sales calls where you like have to like think about a magic number, how much it would be worth, because that's how enterprise works. Ugh, worse.
Peter just said, the worst about enterprise sales, because selling to large companies, enterprises, is as tricky as it gets. Not just because you need to get pricing right, but because of all the enterprise features that you need to build. And this leads us nicely to our season sponsor, WorkOS. If you're building with AI agents or automation tools, here's a problem most teams don't think about at first. Once an agent can take actions on your behalf, you need to control what it's allowed to do, and traditional auth just wasn't designed for that. That's why WorkOS introduced MCP Auth, which gives teams a way to authenticate AI agents with explicit permissions, auditability, and enterprise-grade security. Instead of sharing overscoped API keys, you can define clear boundaries for the data that agents can access and the agents they can perform. If you're building AI-powered features and want to ship fast without compromising security, check out workos.com/MCP. And with this, let's get back to Peter and enterprise pricing.
But it's also the only thing that really works on a model like this.
Yeah, you mean enterprise sales specifically,
Yeah.
right? Meaning custom pricing. So can you tell us for devs listening who go to a vendor's website and they're frustrated that there's no price, it says call us or schedule a meeting, why that is?
No, that's why, because we're gonna look at your company and then just take the dice and think about a number that you're probably willing to pay. And that sounds horrible, but also when you have a product where you can't really tear it down to a specific number, like it makes a difference if a freelancer contacts us or one of the big Fortune 500s. Let's not say names, because the usage will be different, the value they get out of it will be different, and charging the same, you would either exclude one or the other. If I go too low, they're gonna see this fishy. It's like procurement for like $500, we're not gonna even start the process. And if we target too high, we're gonna lose those people. So as horrible and unfair this process seems, for some kind of products it's the most fair way after all. You know on software, I would say there's like 4 axes. There's like easy and hard, and interesting and not interesting. We were very much in the not interesting and hard part. If you build something that every developer wants to build, it's gonna be a hard sell. It's a hard sell anyhow. Yeah. Selling anything to developers is a hard sell. Yeah. But if it's too easy or too interesting, good luck. If it's, oh god, I don't want to do this, and oh my god, this is that's a good spot to be in. So I found a really interesting niche, and there was just an infinite number of contacts for them.
You need to tell me 1 or 2 hard things about parsing PDF. How hard could it be?
Yeah.
If there's a specification, I'm an engineer, I know specifications, what's so hard about it?
I mean, there was this one example where, like DFS, we have links. So like there's like a table of content, and you click on it, and it goes to like page 37. So I built this whole model with the assumption, maybe there's like 100 or 200 links in there. And then we got this one customer who like paid really good money, and then it was like, it takes 4 minutes to load the PDF. What the heck, guys? And I looked at it, and it was like a 50,000 page text Bible from Canada, and it had like
50,000 pages.
It had like more than 100 links per page.
500,000 links.
My data model completely exploded because my assumptions were off by a number of 1,000. But by then you have like a mature product with an API. So like, how do you completely redesign the internal part without breaking things for everyone? Like suddenly everything has to be lazy, but before parsing 101 was easy, but now they were like, this was like so difficult to keep it working for people. I think I spent like 2 months just on that, completely redesigning like the internals and like making sure it's still easy for people. They don't have to know what we load easy, what we load lazy, or if you copy the thing, it still has to like keep some connection.
It needs to get the references and some of those things.
So I love to do support. And I think that was also a confining factor why the company worked. Because if you send a ticket and then the CEO replies and helps you out, that has impact. And my strategy was always like, I always used to list in reverse. Because if you send a ticket and you get a reply within 5 minutes, that's magical. If you wait 1 or 2 days, not much difference. Yeah. So yeah, no, this was one of the problems where I worked 2 months, and I finally got it down to almost like this.
Mm-hmm. That must have been satisfying.
And it was very satisfying.
And you were writing a lot of the code, or you were involved in a bunch of the code. Obviously, the big team was now here, but you were still kind of overseeing it, right? You're in the details.
I mean, of course, I had a really, really great team, and some parts I was more involved. I was always more involved in mobile because that's where my heart was. But I was always very deep in the tech and the marketing side, the business side. I had like Jonathan Side, I had Martin Side. I found good people. The thing is, if you like the blogging and writing about how you solve interesting hard problems, will help you hire interesting people that want to solve interesting problems.
This is what I remember at PS PDF Kit, that your blog was every now and then it made it to Hacker News as well, but it was just interesting to read, and I couldn't name, again, I'm not one into PDFs, but if I had to say something a PDF, I would have said PSPDF because they're the only ones where I read interesting entering blogs about how you optimize or ship. It's still there, by the way. I myself also sometimes ask myself, like, interesting, do more companies not see this? Or is the question that you need to be a developer who's either the CEO or up there who just likes doing this? And by the way, did you ever write this thinking this will be helpful, or you just wrote because you got something out of it, like putting out that you solved this hard problem?
I like sharing and like inspiring people. There was sometimes even conflicts where we were like, should we write about this, because it's like a little bit of secret sauce. But I just never listened to those voices too much. I just, there's also like when you write something down, there's this principle of like, you understand it, but then if you want to teach it, you really have to understand it. So to me, it was also a little bit like, oh yeah, I worked on this really hard problem, and now I want to like preserve it and like help others. So I got a big of it. Of course, I liked the attention, but really it was this. Sometimes I just referenced a year later to my own post. It's like, yeah, this is both company documentation. This is like my own logbook. It's helpful in so many ways. And a lot of the bigger companies, they put on too much red tape. There's a lot of developers that don't really like to write. So I forced everyone once a month, a full day, just to write a blog post.
But you gave them the time. You're like, that day you don't need to do any other work, but write something.
Yeah, you have a day to come up with a post. A day is quite much, actually. I mean, nowadays when I write posts, it still takes me a few hours. I don't want to dwell too much on like I think the starting time of the company is the most interesting. The growth phase, you get more red tape, you get more people. It's much more gardening your product instead of like doing life hacks. And more iterative. So it got a little bit less interesting over the years, and there was like more people drama. The more people you have, the more issues there are. And I didn't enjoy it that much, and I was really, really burned out.
What burnt you out, do you think?
I was just burning too hard. I was working most weekends. I tried to shuffle all my managerial needs. And as a CEO, you're basically the waste bin. Because everything that other people don't manage or can do or mess up, you have to fix. And it's also quite lonely because you can't openly talk about a lot of things. I mean, I structured the company to be quite open, but still, like you cannot be negative. You have to even if like really bad stuff happens. I know there was like one weekend where my co-founder called me at 5 a.m. and told me like, yeah, there's this big airplane company and their planes are down because our software's crashing. That was a very interesting weekend until I disassembled their app and did proof that they messed around with our source code to triggering a license key fallback that eventually like caused the issue they had. But that was like if they sue us, the company's gone and more moment. And that's just on top to all the additional stress, and there were quite a few of those things. You can do it for a while, and I also believe like burnout doesn't necessarily come from working too much. It comes more from, or at least for me, when you work on something and you don't believe in it anymore, or you have like too many conflicts. And we also had we did fight a lot in the team, with like management team. And by the time I made this mistake and I thought you have to like lead a company more democratically, so that was also something that burned me out. I wouldn't want to miss it for a while though.
Yeah. So, from the outside, it seems you sold your shares, you made enough money to not have to work again should you not choose. And for a lot of people, like, people who are starting out their business or one day want to start a business, this sounds like the absolute dream. Like, this is, I guess, what we know realistically that most people will not make it. But if you make it, I mean, you kind of like, I guess, checkbox is done. You're kind of, it's a little bit, if you're like climbing on a wall and you ring the bell, you're done. And then what I noticed is from the outside, again, on your blog, the blog post completely stopped for several years. What did you do in this time? And what did you learn in this time, before you came back to where we are now?
I needed a lot of time to decompress. I catched up a lot on things I thought I missed. I partied a lot. There were months where I didn't even turn on my computer. And for a while, I just didn't have this feeling of like, what should I do now? Like I definitely was like, why bother? You're not supposed to retire so early, or like have such a good exit that you never have to work again. That messed with my mind quite a bit. That was some hard years. And then in April I was like, there was this idea that I had years ago, and even a side project that I started, was like, oh, yeah, I wanna continue on that. And then after more than 3 years, I just sat back on my computer and started hacking again. But the thing was, this was like a Twitter analytics thing, and it was written in Swift. and SwiftUI. And back then, I already knew this would be so much better if I would build as a website.
So was this an existing idea that you kind of had at the back of your mind, something Twitter analytic?
Yeah, it was just like something I wanted to build for myself.
Yeah.
Because it didn't exist, and then even 3 years later, it didn't exist. It still doesn't exist. It kind of does, but I got a bit sidetracked. So I went back and I wanted to build it in this web tech. The web was always, even at the one thing that I looked into the least, because I had someone really smart who took care of that side in the company that I brought in, Martin. So I never had to worry about it. That was one of the...
You're not hands-on with React or any of that
yeah,
stuff.
and when I came back, I was like, what's the problem? You know, that level where and you know, this is a trap I see with many developers. The better you get at one technology, the harder it is to jump somewhere else. It's not that you can do it, but it hurts so much. You're like I can program in Apple Stack, I can program blind, but then in that stack I have to Google the most mundane stuff, and it just hurts. You feel like an idiot again.
Yeah, and I guess the more experience you have, it kind of sucks feeling. I mean, I'm sure you say embrace and all that, but it's not great. You're not as efficient. You know that you could be faster, etc.
Yeah, so I came back and I was like, gosh, there has to be. What is this AI? What is this AI stuff that people are dismissing? Let's look into this.
Yeah, and in April, a lot of us were dismissing it, probably for rightfully so. But
and I to a degree I credit those 3 years where I basically didn't turn on my computer, because in those years you guys checked out AI and learned that it's crap.
yeah, the people who, like, I was about to say, so you missed out on, you didn't do the beta of GitHub Copilot, you know, glorified autocomplete, which is GPT-3 or maybe not even. There was then, of course, 3.5, which is a big jump, and it got incrementally better than GPT-4. And so by the time you came back, what tool did you first use? Because you missed out on like 2 years of like devs using, dismissing, finding some niche use cases for it.
Oh, Cloud Code.
So you started with Cloud Code.
I think that came out.
Just came out. It came out in May, but there was a beta beforehand.
Yeah, I think they had something. Didn't they have something in February already?
They had a beta from February, correct?
Yeah. So
Cloud Code was your first. You come back after like a hiatus, and you immediately turned on Cloud Code, and you missed everything else.